I've decided to make the large waste paper cup first. We use FR grade polystyrene to carve it. I'm turning it on the table because I want it in full round first, so I know exactly what I'm achieving. From there we're going to take a waste mould. That means we only get one taken from the mould, so there's only one chance for a cast. We're going to lay it up in glass fibre and then actually buckle the cup and see how it reacts. Quite a risky thing to do, but I think it's worth it. Here we are creating a pigeon, again from polystyrene as a plug. We use nail brushes and wire brushes to achieve a nice finish. Eventually we use sandpapers, as you can see on the conker, so we end up with a lovely smooth finish. The best thing about using polystyrene is we can achieve very large objects in a relatively short space of time. It even gives good detail using a virgin bead. You can see the sort of detail on this street furniture and architecture. It's been really nice making these objects as they've been so varied. I think AKQA, whoever decided on these particular shapes and forms, had a good idea of what was going to be achieved at the end of the day. My actual client is AKQA, which is a London-based creative company. They've approached me, which I thought was quite brave really, as they didn't know me from Adam and they haven't used me before. But we started off with about 25 objects which we was looking at to build. And then we whittled it down slowly over time to 15 to 12 and down to about, I think it's 8 objects in total. And the objects I've chosen have been quite eclectic really, a nice mix of objects. And they want them all roughly 8 times life size, which is the kind of gag or the whole advertising campaign of the 8 times life size zoom they've got on the camera on the Lumix ZX1. They're going to be positioned all around the country and hopefully create a lot of interest and a lot of advertising space.
The conker, covered in Drive-It, which is a flexible concrete spray, fiberglass, and trying to polish up these other areas as well. Nice and hard. We need to put some detail and the metalwork in it now. The big plastic cup did exactly what we wanted. A bit of a risk, but we turned the cup so we had a nice tooled finish, and then we actually took a pull from the mould and then cracked the pull itself and dented it, so it reacted in exactly the same way as a real cup would. Good result all round. In fact, it's got other things that we hadn't expect to happen, which is a bonus. It sort of pulled it in exactly, and I'm not sure that I would have carved it in that fashion, but good results. The dry post box, nice bit of detail on the top. Up here, the letterbox, which we've now recessed even further. At the mood board, everyone's happy with the chair, so we're about to proceed, do some carvings into it, paint it, and break it down basically to give it a bit of aging process.
It's funny, when you take on a new project, it seems exciting and thrilling and a real buzz of sort of panic, and as well as so how the hell are we going to get this done? And you get through the project, you come across problems, you actually come across ideas and new materials that you inevitably have to use. And often the projects that we take on develop their own sort of projects and sort of pushes it or forces us into a corner where we have to develop our own sort of shortcuts or ideas or find out new products and materials in order to overcome them. So each project we do is actually really fascinating, and it's a kind of a learning curve for both the client and ourselves here in Sculpture Studios. I personally, as a sculptor, loved the hands-on. I'm not really an office person. Quite often I have a project in where I have to call in other sculptors or other people to build patterns and so on. But when I look out into the studio and I'm on the phone, being an office person, I actually wish I was out there developing the work myself. After all, that's what I trained for. So when the project goes out and I see something which I've actually carved and spent time on, before I go home in the evening and turn out the light, I look back onto the project or whatever I've been carving during the day, and it's a real sense of satisfaction, really. Taking on projects such as this actually has its rewards and its kind of downside at the same time. When you take on a new client, or they take on you, you're actually getting to know each other at the same time, as well as the project trying to develop its own pace. One of the major problems is actually understanding of what the client actually requires from the work or what you produce. It's all down to cost and mostly time. People don't mind paying out as long as they get a good project or a good end result. But at the same time, they often leave it very, very late, which is incredibly hard to produce a decent project in a very short space of time. But yeah, I think you learn from each and every project. Also, AKQA, I believe it was the first time of coming off the board and making a three-dimensional project, which is why they come to me in the first place, because I'm used to film work and television and theatre. Here we are, releasing the mould from the plug. It was a wooden former plug with a fiberglass mould on top. We're using long sticks to actually drive down between the mould and the plug so it releases. It's a very tricky operation, as we wanted to keep the mould relatively light, mainly for the client's sake, because we don't have a lot of time in order to lay up an expensive mould, and also we don't have a lot of time in terms of like meeting the deadline. But once it's off the plug, we piece it all together and then put wooden formers to keep it nice and square and keeping the actual glass case strong. Here we are laying up the mould with glass fibre, and we're using a Class O rated resin. This means it's got a fire rating, which is good for the general public if they're in a captive audience, which they are in the tube stations and so on. Quite a lengthy process, uncomfortable, but I have some good staff who know what they're doing. It's often quite difficult making a large object, mainly because people often want the things in very large pieces and they want it strong because the general public, and they want to use it several times. But also we still have to remember about the manhandling of it. So we have to make it large and strong but still relatively light so it can be transported and fixed into position. Here we are putting the whole thing together with a lovely seam line. It's lovely. Finished with some 2-pack paints matching the Panasonic colours. I think it's turned out quite nice. Here we are actually doing some finishing details. We tried to get the Panasonic camera, the Lumix, exactly as the small one would be, so as people to look at it, they can take a direct representation and look at both and enjoy it. We also fitted a 103-inch plasma screen to the inside and created air vents so the whole thing could breathe. People can enjoy the front of the camera as well as the back and see the large screen. I personally think the job has gone really well, considering the time restraints and everything else like within the barn that we hired out for the period of time. But it's all come together nicely, and I'm really happy with the project, and I hope that Panasonic are pleased with it too, who are indeed the end user. Here we have the pigeon in position, on location, and also some of the large objects. I think they were quite fun objects and everyone enjoyed them and actually interacted with them. Seeing outsized props or they felt to me almost like pieces of sculpture, like pop art almost. Seeing these great big fun objects in the almost like natural habitats, like the conker in the garden and traffic cone along the side of the street. Yeah, it worked really, really well, and I think the campaign has been really good. Lots of publicity. Enjoyed the project, really. I think I've always enjoyed making large objects like this, and it's one of the reasons why I went to art college in the first place, so I can get to create great things and see them used properly. Thank you very much indeed.